Good afternoon y buenas tardes a todos. My name is Joanna Otero Cruz, and I am honored to be here with you today to welcome you to Voices Against Violence, hosted by Women Against Abuse. We are here today to engage with mayoral candidates for the city of Philadelphia about violence prevention and public safety. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a todos que están escuchando en español. We are joined today by David O., Rebecca Reinhardt, and Sherelle Parker. I will mention that all candidates have been invited to participate, and we are extremely grateful for those who have prioritized this conversation this morning. Today, we come together with the hope that our city's plan for addressing current levels of violence consider the impact of domestic violence, often forgotten, but is fundamental to the health and safety of our community. We know that the violence we see on the streets is only a fraction of the violence some families experience at home. We cannot talk about the gun violence without talking about domestic violence. Women Against Abuse serves many of these survivors through our emergency safe havens and our legal center. Over the last few years, we have seen elements of intimate partner violence evolve in ways we never could have imagined. And we've had to adapt to our services to best meet the needs of our clients. We're here to talk to mayoral candidates about what they plan to do to reduce violence in the city of Philadelphia and to support survivors of domestic violence that live here. The form is being made available via simultaneous translation into Spanish, so I ask that you attempt to not speak too quickly, even though we have requested time limits to allow the translator to keep up with you so that more Philadelphians have access to your responses so we can all make an educated and informed decision with our votes. While we ask you to take 2 minutes to answer, you will not be interrupted until about 2:15 has lapsed so that we can give time to the translator. I'm going to turn it over to the candidates for a short 2-minute introduction, starting with David O.
All right. I'm not sure if I'm on. Am I on?
You are. Please introduce yourself.
Fantastic. My name is David O., and I am running for mayor. Of course, the big issue that is concerning all of our city is the violence that has plagued our city. Community violence and public safety is a great concern. It's something I do understand from a professional level. I served in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office under Ed Rendell and then Ron Castile, and also served the victims of violence and had to deal with the people that were perpetrating these crimes as well. I served as an attorney, and I also served on the boards of many nonprofit organizations dealing with this issue. The first thing is that in general, when our city is not doing well, the people in it suffer. And we have had a problem because of the economy, because of crime, because of uncleanliness and poor services, and a very pessimistic view of the future. Schools, jobs, and those type of things impact how people feel about themselves. And unfortunately, they take it out oftentimes on the person closest to them. And so we have got to not only deal with crime in general, the level of violence, but we have to remove the anxiety that people feel in their life. We have to show them a better future, a safer community, and give them a pathway where they also believe that the things that are supposed to happen for their family, which is a source of great stress, is happening. And they have to see that visibly. In terms of the direct services, we need to have a better trained police force. First responders, they have to be coordinated with other service organizations, and they have to understand how to respond. And so in addition to general training for all police officers, there has to be a special responder unit that is particularly tasked with intervention and coordination to not escalate a problem, because hopefully we can keep the families together, but there must be very quick action to remove the problem at its source, any firearms or dangers that exist within the household, and of course provide for the children until such time as this is resolved.
Thank you so much, David O. I'll turn it over to Rebecca Reinhardt.
Well, good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here today. My name is Rebecca Reinhardt. I'm running for mayor after about 15 years working for the residents of our city. And I'm running for mayor because I believe I'm the right person to lead our city forward and make the changes that we need in city government. I was the city's budget director for 5 years. I was the city's treasurer. I was the city's chief administrative officer, responsible for about 1,000 employees, the back office function of the city, got things done. And then I decided to run for office. I ran for city controller in 2017 and ran against a long-term incumbent. And despite running against the party, I won with 58% of the vote. And I think that says that people want change and want a government that truly works for them. As city controller, I took on powerful issues and did audits of areas that hadn't been looked at before. I was the first elected woman city controller that the city has had. And one of my first audits was the audit of the city's sexual harassment policies, procedures, and payouts. And the reason I did that audit was because as a woman working for the city over a number of years, I had heard stories and seen issues. And then with the issues around sexual harassment in the parking authority, I felt it necessary to take that on, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that today. So overall, I am running for mayor to make the change that I think this city needs, to make it safer, cleaner, and to fix our schools. Gun violence is my top priority. My daughter's in the public school system, so fixing the schools is extremely important and personal to me. And I want to make sure the city government works. And part of that working is protecting people and protecting women in need. And I look forward to this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from Sherelle Parker.
Thank you so very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with my family at Women Against Abuse. I am proud that I have a long-standing working relationship with Women Against Abuse that goes back to my years in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. It is with that in mind that I come before you today as a candidate to be the 100th mayor of the city of Philadelphia. I want you to know that my personal, real life lived experience closely mirrors that of the people who are currently feeling the most pain in our city. It is because of that I am unapologetic about my advocacy to ensure that we live in the safest, cleanest, and greenest big city in the nation that will provide access to economic opportunity for all. When elected mayor, with your support, I commit to you that I will fully enact my comprehensive neighborhood safety community policing plan. Calls for us to proactively put 300 officers on the ground, solely and specifically engaged in community policing, 30 in each council district, walking the beats, riding the bikes, becoming a presence in the communities that they are sworn to protect and serve, and not just there because of a crisis. In addition to that, we're going to have access to opportunity. I grew up on public assistance. My mother was a single teenage mother. I was raised by my grandparents. I know what it's like when you have to rely on government to help and take care of you. Well, I want to put people on a path to self-sufficiency. And education is an essential tool to making that happen. We will advocate strongly for both traditional publics and charters focused on quality seats with quality instruction in 21st century buildings. And when I talk about safety, rest assured that violence against women, just as strongly as I advocated for a VAWA, at the federal level, that will be essential in my plan. And I look forward to talking to you more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Welcome, James DeLeon. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, this is James DeLeon, candidate for mayor of Philadelphia. And I'm very concerned as to violence against women. And I have a plan called the local system, which is a set of policies and procedures that the government would use to combat violence against women by enabling the necessary responders to work more effectively and efficiently together to manage the root causes of violence against women. Specifically, I was the domestic violence judge in Philadelphia for 34 years. The women organized against abuse, the women organized against rape. They know me specifically in the courtroom as I looked over and guarded women against perpetrators in my courtroom. I made sure that when women left my courtroom, they were safe going home. If there were any problems, the women would call me on the phone right in my chambers, and I would directly put them on the phone with a representative from the district attorney's office that was a prosecutor of crimes against women. And we would make out specifics as to the protection of that particular person. I hold the life of women very dearly in my arms. And this is a situation that I have battled ever since I was on the bench. I will continue battling this situation as mayor, and I will look out over all women and ensure their safety and well-being.
Thank you. I'm going to read a question in the order in terms of response. We'll go first to Cheryl Parker, then Rebecca Reinhardt, David O, and James DeLeon. Gun violence in the city of Philadelphia presents a huge threat to safety of our city's families, and particularly to survivors who are 5 times more likely to be killed by an intimate partner if the partner has access to a gun. Similarly, recent data found that domestic violence homicides have risen. In 2017, 28. In 2020, it grew to 43, and just last year, 37. As mayor, how would you reduce gun violence in the city and limit access to guns for people perpetrating abuse? And how do you plan to address the rising domestic violence homicide rates? Cheryl Parker?
No, thank you so very much for that question. And I want to add some more very heart-wrenching data to that. According to our Pennsylvania State Police, we've seen a 600% increase in the issuance of license to carry permits in our city from 7,400 to 52,000. And that was just between 2020 and 2021. In addition to that, 24,000 handguns were sold or transferred in Philadelphia alone. You and I know what that means. So we need to do a couple of things. Number one, I'm unapologetic about making public safety and public health our number one priority. In addition to that, we need very strong intergovernmental cooperation to ensure that all of our existing laws on the books are being enforced. We also need to lobby Harrisburg, work with our governor, Josh Shapiro, as well as our other leadership on other sides of the aisle to ensure that we get common sense measures enacted into law that will control the flow of guns getting into the hands of people who should not have them. And when I talk about enforcing our laws, I want you to talk about or think about protection from abuse orders, and where firearms are involved. We need to ensure that the laws, our existing laws, are being enforced. In addition to that, to anyone who has needed the service of Women Against Abuse, I want you to know that this is about power. From sexual abuse and just all violence against women is about power. I introduced and passed into law when I was in Harrisburg. It was a bill now, it's Act 75 of 2012, and it allowed experts to testify in cases of sexual assault. It took me 6 years to get it done, but I worked in a bipartisan manner to do it. Other people will talk about what they would like to see happen. I'm proud that I have a very strong record of supporting women who have been victims of domestic violence. And I want you to know that your immigration status should not be anything that causes you to fear asking for the support and help that you need. And under a Parker administration, again, your public health and safety will be my number one priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Sorry, I was muted. Apologies. As mayor, starting on day one, I will work to tackle this gun violence. First, we have to get the illegal guns off the streets and out of our city. The way that I'll do that is I will pull the district attorney and the police commissioner into the same room to get on the same page about this. We have so many illegal guns circulating in our city. The police have doubled the number of arrests for illegal carry, while the conviction rate has declined from 65 to 42% by the DA. We need to get in the same room and get on the same page so that we can be laser focused in getting these guns off of our streets. And then as a city, we need to show compassion and support for women and partners that are suffering from abusive situations. It's a very difficult position to be in. We need to make sure that the police are trained to handle this, that 911 callers are handling calls in a way that's sensitive and supportive. And I will make sure that the total city administration and city services are trained and sensitive to this topic, because there is way too much violence that goes on behind closed doors in homes around our city. And as a city, we need to do better to reach out to people in need and to help them through police training, through support services, through working with Women Against Abuse. I've worked with Women Against Abuse on the follow-up for my audit of the city's sexual harassment policies and procedures. And I'll continue to do that, because only by working together will we strengthen the systems to protect our most vulnerable people. And often that is women in their own home, which is not okay. And it is something that I will work on every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. David? Oh.
Yes, thank you. The first problem that we have to address is the overall violence, murder, and threats in the city. Because of that, there is an increase in legal gun ownership. And when it comes to domestic violence, it's as likely to be harmed or threatened by a legal gun as an illegal gun. The other problem is that as more and more murders and shootings occur, they get the attention of law enforcement. It goes to the top of the list. And unfortunately, other crimes begin to drop in terms of the seriousness that they're taken or the priority. And so when police and law enforcement are dealing with murders and shootings, a call that comes in from someone who's being threatened at home from a domestic partner becomes lower on the perception scale. That's something that we have to address in terms of the fact that we need to specifically inform our police, our patrol officers, our detectives, And that training is important, but there also has to be a specifically trained unit that is they're not just aware and alert of those generalities. They have specific knowledge of what nonprofits are working, how to provide shelter, how to provide shelter for example, women with children. Children become another issue. How to ensure that when this work is being done, that people feel confidence. You know, just like people who are purchasing guns because they don't have confidence in our criminal law enforcement, our police, and our city. People are not calling when they need help because they fear that all that's going to happen is they're going to get further abuse. So we have to have a unit of police that can respond with knowledge and coordinate those services that the police don't have, and then bring them into the court system swiftly so that things like protection from abuse orders can happen, and removal of firearms and weapons of those sorts are done quickly as well. I think those are important things in improving the problem we face.
Thank you, David. Mr. James De Leon.
So, as the Women Against Abuse know, I'm a man of action, not a man of talk, like what we've just heard. There's specifics that need to be done in order to protect women in domestic violence situations. The first is, let's deal with the protection from abuse order, okay, the petition itself. I would have added to that petition, regardless of the facts that bring the case into court, I would have a question added: does the individual have access to a gun? Okay, so we'll put that right on there. Now, with that, I will have the police go out to that individual's home when he's served, and or she, and we will search the property for that particular firearm. And under that PFA, that particular firearm will be confiscated. The second aspect is that once we get down to court, we're going to put a social media ban on the individual for the domestic violence. He's going to have, he or she will have a social media ban that during the course of the proceedings, they will not be able to go on social media, because we understand that social media is the driving force in a lot of domestic violence cases. The third thing we're going to do is put a curfew on that individual. That individual can go out in the morning at 6 and come back at 9. Depending on their work and their education schedule. But also during that time, we're going to give that person anger management training. We're going to give them mental health training. We're going to give them post-traumatic stress training. We're going to give them job counseling. We're going to give them counseling so that they know that they can turn their lives around, that it's not going to be about them having being a perpetrator or on a person that has them in domestic violence court. Now, these are specific actions that I will undertake as mayor to ensure the safety of individuals that come into the domestic violence courtroom.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is, as a result of negative experiences with local police and legal systems, many of our clients do not believe the legal system works for them. Similarly, our legal center attorneys encounter many challenges when working with local law enforcement. These include a lack of understanding of domestic violence and laws around protection from abuse orders, oftentimes referred to as PFAs, a lack of communication between various units that result in inaction, which is very detrimental to our clients, and a lack of consistency in response to domestic violence between various police departments, or police units, I should say, and judges. As mayor, what steps would you take to improve the law enforcement responses in domestic violence in the city? We'll start with Rebecca Reinhardt.
Yeah. So as mayor, I would work to break down the silos between the different entities that are creating issues with a lack of communication. So the mayor's job is to pull the criminal justice partners together and make sure that everyone is on the same page and going in the same direction. So that means pulling together the courts, the district attorney's office, and the police to make sure that all of the partners are working together. So the issue here being that, well, there's two issues you mentioned. The first, though, being that the communication is bad between the various stakeholders, between the courts, the judges, the police, the detective, and the person, the victim. That is not acceptable. And that is something that I would bring to the attention of the stakeholders and say, we need to figure this out. We need to fix this. And we need to give the communication that a victim of a domestic violence deserves in our city. And the other thing that I will do is have police be trained and be sensitive to the issue of domestic violence, because we cannot have people feel that they are unprotected by the police, the judges, and the detectives in the system. That's not okay. So as mayor, I will work to improve the system, to stand up for those that are victims, and to make sure that the city of Philadelphia is truly working for them. That's what I will do every day. Thank you.
Thank you. David O?
Yes, thank you. I worked in this field actively as an assistant district attorney, and I understand some of the biases that occur when you're under stress dealing with aggravated assaults and repeat offenders. It can be that when someone calls about domestic violence, shows up in court, and then refuses to testify, that the prosecutor, such as myself, becomes upset, that and the police, because they've gone there numerous times, once, twice, three times. But the important thing is that we receive training and education, and that's something that I did not receive. I did learn through experience. And as mayor, I would ensure that we are informing our police officers and training them to remove bias and to remove their personal judgments. If someone is in a relationship, for example, they have a child together, it's very difficult. They come forward, but if at the end they do not testify, that is something that they can choose to do. If they call the next time, we respond. They call again, we respond. As many times as they call, we respond, so that they get the sense and understanding, and other people around them, that you can call and we will respond to save their life, to save the situation that they're in. I think in addition to that, it's important to have officers in each district that are familiar with the processes. Before it gets to court, before you sit in front of a judge, there are many steps that have to be taken. First of all, when you respond, where will the victim go? And if they have children, there's very limited resources available, and so that has to be coordinated. Victims will not call because they don't want the Department of Human Services to get involved and remove their children. And they've heard on the streets how difficult it is to get their children back. That has to be taken out of the equation. So they're not fearful of calling. They have to have that response. It has to be available in language. It has to be sympathetic. They worry about how to go to their job if they have one, how they'll feed their children if they don't have one. All those services have to be described, and they have to be described by the police officers, who are the first to arrive on the scene, and secondly, by those social workers and nonprofit organizations that come to the scene. They have to be supported by the mayor's office so that they can do their job as well.
Thank you. Cheryl Parker? You're on mute.
So many victims experiencing domestic violence across our Commonwealth have been suffering in silence for years. We've seen the increase, particularly in the midst of COVID, the civil unrest, and the rise in overall violence. But nothing becomes even more frustrating to people who have that life experience than government thinking it understands, but doesn't understand the challenge of the victims. I learned this when I worked to get Act 75 of 2012 passed, that again strengthened victims' rights by permitting experts to testify regarding a victim's behavior in the case of sexual assault. It is because of that that I would ensure that there is a very consistent understanding of the complexity of domestic violence cases across the city of Philadelphia. No case is the same. We have to treat all domestic violence, protection from abuse order cases with respect to all of the victims of abuse and connecting them with our Office of the Victims Advocate. In addition, we must continue to fund programs that support victims of abuse with ease and access, have a fully trained and staffed police force, prevent the backlog of cases by enhancing the flow and ensuring that each police district have the personnel necessary to ensure that they are trained with working with victims of domestic violence and with mental health supports. And again, as I opened up, I don't want anyone, because of language access or their immigration status, to not feel like they can get the help that they need. We are tired of a lack of intergovernmental cooperation here in our city, and there's no one who has the level of state and local experience that I bring, along with our interactions with the federal government. Thank you. We need all agencies to help solve this crisis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And James De Leon?
Okay. So again, this is the situation that the local incident management system that I spoke about would be handling. The first component that would deal in this particular type of problem is that I would have a buffer, because I realize that there's tension between the neighborhood and the police. Now, the buffer would be a community coach. That would be individuals that are trained in post-traumatic stress, mental health disorder awareness, domestic violence awareness, CPR, anything that's needed as to how to approach a neighbor as to a situation. Now, they would be, because of the fact that there are two types of domestic cases. You have the domestic cases that are below criminal, and you have the domestic cases that rise to criminal. Now, the first thing is with the domestic that's below criminal, the individual would be called out on a 311 number rather than a 911. The police would not be there. That individual would engage that family or that situation to determine whether or not they could suppress the situation. If an excited utterance comes out where the individual says that they've been abused, or if there are marks on the body that show abuse, then that community coach would have a silent alarm where they would call backup, which would be the police. Now, in that situation, as far as the police are concerned, domestic violence is a very, very, very serious situation for the police. In the counties, most of the police officers that have been shot have been because they've answered domestic violence situation. So I need to have my officers trained across the board, every single one, as to how to approach a domestic violence situation, not just for their safety, but for the safety of the individuals involved in the domestic situation. Now, when we have all these going into effect, what will happen is that we will have a better opportunity of treating the domestic violence situation in the manner that it should be treated in. Whether or not that individual should be taken into custody, that person will go into custody in a safe manner. The individual that's involved in the domestic violence as the victim will be treated in accordance with the injuries that they've received or the situation that they found themselves in.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon. The next question is going to be following the following order. Shara, I'm going to go to you first, then Mr. James De Leon, and then you, Rebecca. Communities all over the country have called for defunding the police in big cities and reinvesting in an organization like ours who serve clients that only call the police as a last resort. Similarly, victims of domestic violence who call the police often need, in addition to law enforcement. Other cities and jurisdictions are using models such as risk assessment programs in which the police assess risk whenever they respond to a domestic violence situation or call, and then connect victims with advocates over the phone. Other departments, police departments, are embedding advocates in police departments. How do you envision better supporting agencies that serve victims of crime but are not law enforcement? And what approach or model is your administration interested in potentially implementing? You're on mute.
First, let me start by stating that I never have and never will embrace a slogan or govern according to a slogan. But for those people, when they repeated that slogan, really meant that they wanted to access services that were very much needed in our communities, I couldn't agree more. We must find a way to continuing to fund agencies like Women Against Abuse to help bolster the work that you do to help victims of crime to recover and rebuild. I believe that the model that you referenced, the risk assessment model, that it works in dealing with domestic violence cases. You want me to tell you why? Because there's no one size fits all. They're not all the same. Sometimes a victim needs to be immediately relocated. They need to get out of state. Sometimes they need to go to another section of the city. Sometimes they need counseling and or therapy, immediately. Whatever the need is, we need to use that risk assessment model in order to get it done. But I think we must deal with these cases also with a framework that organizes them on the likelihood of a crime occurring, and applying specific programming and enforcement to the situation that is appropriate. I also want to go back to lived life experience. You will hear me talking about that a lot, and we need a more of an emotional response and less punitive. And we do need to listen to the people who have experience here. I now want to say something that's not very popular. Those who are in the sphere and providing services to victims, cultural competency is important. The race, sex, class, gender, sexual orientation, having someone like you who's walked in your shoes is extremely important, and that will be an essential part of my administration and helping to assist victims of domestic violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. James De Leon.
So as I told you initially, with my local incident management system, in the last question, each officer that I have on my force is going to have training in domestic violence. So taking that into mind, any officer that arrives on the scene, initially anyway, they are doing a risk assessment. That is a normal process of policing when you arrive on the scene as a thinking individual as to what are you walking into. So with this trained police officer, as all will be, seeing what's happening, they will then make their risk assessment as to whether or not it's a criminal matter, whether or not it's a non-criminal matter. Now, depending on how high it is, then they will go into the steps as to whether or not they need to take the person into custody, whether or not the victim needs to go to the hospital or go to a sex crimes unit or to fill out a report or whatever is needed as to where that person has to go. At that stage right there, yes, we do need an individual in-house that can talk to the witness, the individual victim, and tell the individual victim things that they need to do in order to make themselves safer for the time being as far as their family is concerned. And they need to be given whatever is needed at that time to make sure that they're safe going forward. So also, we have what I was telling you about as to the buffer system, the community coach. That individual also is in place. So as we go through this system, we need checks and balances, not just initially with the community coach, but also with the trained police officer, and also when the individual was sent to the station to fill out a paper with the detective as to what happened, that there is an advocate at that station that can refer them to the next step, whereas that next step might be Women Organized Against Abuse, where you will take it over from there with funding from me to make sure that the victim is safe.
Thank you. And Rebecca? You're on mute.
Apologies. The two models that you mentioned, the risk assessment model and the embedded advocate model, are both useful. And to me, it's a combination of making sure that we both assess the risk as well as have an advocate embedded in the 911 call center, as well as along the process into the court process. So the first thing is the risk assessment is extremely helpful in having the responder, the 911 caller, be able to assess with the victim on the phone how much risk they potentially are in from their abusive partner. And that's incredibly important. It's been found to be useful across the country in assessing risk. And all of these tools are helpful to make our city government better protect people, victims in their own homes. And that's the goal here. And as mayor, I would bring together experts in this field to determine the best way forward and the changes we need to make within city government to better work with outside stakeholders, such as Women Against Abuse, to accomplish what we need to accomplish here. The embedded advocate within the 911 system, for example, is incredibly important because that person can provide guidance right there if needed. And that is important to do. We need to have that to support victims of abuse. And we need to have a stronger mental health component of that as well. So overall, these are the types of programs and changes that I will make as mayor and that we must make to make our city safe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Act 79, which strengthens firearm prohibitions in domestic violence cases, went into effect in 2019. In part, this statute requires the relinquishment of firearms to law enforcement or an armory. One, defendants who have been convicted in misdemeanor domestic violence cases, and two, respondents in protection from abuse cases where it is part of an agreement where a judge has issued a final protection from abuse order after a hearing, or in cases where the judge has ordered it in a temporary order. Act 79 requires multiple systems, including police, sheriffs, criminal, and family court to coordinate and to communicate. To truly effectuate Act 79, technology upgrades may be needed. Despite the passage of Act 79 and efforts by multiple systems, we too are part of that system at Women Against Abuse, there are still gaps in this enforcement. How would you ensure better enforcement of this important law? And I'm going to start with Sherelle Parker.
Thank you so very much, Jolie. You know, this is an issue that I am very much familiar with, because breaking down silos in government that unfortunately arise, particularly when you're dealing with different branches of government, along with the courts and then the offices of independently elected officials like sheriff. But what I want you to know is that technological upgrades are so important to breaking down those silos. We need a technological system in place so that the courts can effectively communicate a gun relinquishment order in a timely manner to both the sheriff and the police. But listen, most importantly, so that 24-hour clock starts ticking. And then both the sheriff and the police know exactly how much time is left on the clock. Because that dictates who has responsibility. Surrounding counties, let me be honest, around Philadelphia, they are doing a better job than we are in enforcing Act 79. This is what I will do. I'm going to reach out to my counterparts in our 5-county area to see what's working and what's not working in those counties. And two, I'm proud to have relationships on both sides of the aisle and in our 5-county area that I will use to work with them to secure additional funding from Harrisburg to leverage our local support and to assist with the enforcement of Act 79. Again, I want to go back to that legislation that it took me 6 years to get passed, that I worked with Kate Harper of Montgomery County, a Republican legislator, that Pennsylvania and Minnesota were the only 2 states in the nation that did not allow experts to testify in sexual assault. And this was long before the Me Too movement. You want me to tell you how we knew it was essential? Because we listened to the people who were on the ground and who were survivors. This the same thing I would do and the same perspective I would bring to assist victims, who have been impacted by violence. And it doesn't just occur in their homes. It also occurs wherever they are. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. De Leon.
Thank you. So with this particular type of situation, again, this would be my local incident management system, which is a set of processes and procedures that would enable the city government to effectively manage this type of situation through my director of public safety. Now, you have to think about the fact that now all the individuals that are involved in this Act 79 as to the confiscation of a gun, they are not trained in incident management. Under my administration, the particular people involved would be trained in incident management so that when they come together, they know exactly what to do in order to get this gun as time goes on when a judge gives an order for a gun to be confiscated. Now, the situation is that, yes, there is a need for technology to be upgraded. And what happens is, which none of the candidates are telling you other than myself, is that there is over $800 million that has to be spent between now and 2025. Now, $400 million of those dollars would go into my budget in the year 2024. Out of that money, after a consultation with my director of public safety, as well as the sheriff, the police commissioner, and the court system, whatever is needed in order to have a smooth transition of an order, a confiscation, and a destruction would take place, using the money, some of the money there, to upgrade our technology to make that happen. That's an easy fix that the local incident management system is more than capable of handling.
Great. Rebecca.
Okay. So in order to solve this issue, what is needed first is better coordination among the agencies. As Chief Administrative Officer, when I oversaw multiple back office functions of the city, I worked to cut down on the silos in the departments that reported up to me. For example, in the length of time for a vendor to get paid by the city. And in order to do that, I had to work with the departments, break down the issues, and get results. And that's what I did. And as mayor, what I'll do is pull together these stakeholders. Everyone needs to be rowing in the same direction. The courts, the police, the sheriff, the DA, everyone needs to be making this a priority and to figure out what the issues are and to make it happen. Because if something is a priority, it can happen. And that's what I will do as mayor. Additionally, on the topic of the technology, if there is a technology fix that is necessary, well, then there's many grant opportunities. I know from being the city's budget director that often we can apply for grants for technological upgrades, especially related to public safety. And we should be doing that in order to make the upgrades that are necessary so that this truly works in the city of Philadelphia. Many issues that the city has are because there's a lack of prioritization of fixing it. And to me, this is about protecting people, protecting women, partners in their homes. This is of utmost importance. And so as mayor, I will make this a priority and will ensure that we are pushing forward to fix this here in Philly and help victims and survivors.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Sherelle Parker. The Philadelphia Police Department does not have enough detectives dedicated specifically to domestic violence and sexual assault cases. The number has been recently reduced. How will you assure that victims of sexual assault and domestic violence receive a prompt, thorough, trauma-informed, and victim-centered police response?
One, by making sure that we aggressively enact my comprehensive neighborhood safety and community policing plan. That is to ensure that we not only have our full complement of officers on board, but those who specialize in cases associated with domestic violence. For example, we need to make sure that we have a sufficient number of detectives who are actually here. We have not been intentional. And I want, survivors of domestic violence to know that until you have a leader who is unapologetic about making the tough decisions needed to bring order back to our city, that means ensuring that we've made support for those who may become victims of domestic violence, because we don't always want to be responding, right? We should be thinking about prevention, intervention, and then enforcement. Those are the three buckets. So I want to work in making sure that within the police department, the resources necessary to ensure that the communication takes place, that the detectives we need takes place, along with the training that they need. We want to make sure they have access to all of it. But I also want to make sure that we have access to supportive housing solutions. I want to make sure that a transfer, if a child needs to be transferred from one school to another, that there is a system that is wholly integrated to ensure that children can be moved quickly when time is of the essence. We have not been intentional about coordinating that kind of activity. In addition to that, I want to go back to the issue of language access and cultural competency. In every entity, I don't care if that's mental and behavioral health, I don't care if that's any other form of counseling, therapy, and/or training for officers engaged in supporting victims of domestic violence. Having someone who has lived experience is extremely important, and they should be the consultants hired and working with departments to ensure that someone who intimately knows about this is assisting in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, could you respond to the question as well? Regarding the Philadelphia Police Department?
Yes, absolutely. It's very concerning that the number of detectives has declined related to sexual assault and domestic violence. As mayor, I will work to improve the hiring of police officers and of detectives. When I was city controller, I did an audit of the police department, which showed that out of a little under 6,000 officers, only 2,500 are on patrol. The vast majority are in specialized units or doing desk work. And we do need to move officers onto patrol and to do policing work that when they can. In terms of increasing the detectives, we must be able to have a fully staffed detective unit in order to make victims feel understood and feel supported and have their cases solved and have the attention on their cases. I've heard personal stories from women that have been victims of sexual assault in Philadelphia and had very negative experiences in our police stations. That there's a lack of sensitivity, a lack of understanding. And I'm sure that's not everyone. I'm sure it's not. But what it says to me is that there is an issue with the training, with the trauma-informed training, with understanding what a victim can remember and how they remember. Sometimes trauma makes memory fragmented, for example, and the detective needs to understand that fragmentation of memory. That's just one example of how we need to make sure that our detectives are trained in trauma-informed practices. And as mayor, I will make sure that our police department is trained that way. And so survivors do feel supported as they move through the process.
Thank you. Mr. James DeLeon?
Thank you. So again, this is where the local incident management system is built for to work very well. Now, let me explain a little bit more to you as this goes. Every domestic violence case in the city of Philadelphia, I myself as mayor would declare a dramatic incident because it is a dramatic incident. Now, what we have in the city, there are two ways that I'm losing lives here in Philadelphia. I'm losing lives through random homicides, and I'm losing lives through specific homicides. The random homicides could be like a robbery or, where a person accidentally gets killed, or you have the specifics, which are rape and domestic violence, okay, specifically. So I need to have both of my detective staffs to the max. I need to have as many people as needed. And this is where my local incident management system would determine how many detectives do we need in order to handle the amount of volume that we have coming through as far as abuse, as far as rape. We need to have those staff for those particular victims so that they can get the care they need, so that we can make sure that their lives are safe. And we cannot have a small amount of people on that. It almost has to be the exact same type of staff as the homicide staff, because it's that important, because we're at the stage where we need to try to save lives. And in order to save lives, we need to have all the resources that we can muster to into those particular units to make sure that the individual's citizen that comes through there is going to know that they're coming into a safe environment. They know that once they get there, we're going to make sure they're safe, and they know that we're going to do everything possible to ensure their safety and that of their families.
Great. We're going to be shifting to prevention and collaboration questions. I'm going to start with Rebecca, followed by Sherelle, and then Mr. De Leon. A coordinated community response is essential to assist victims of domestic violence. This means true communication and coordination among systems such as police, the sheriff's office, the DA's office, and courts. As mayor, you will have oversight of some systems, but not all. How will you pull disparate systems to work together? Rebecca?
Sure. So as mayor, I will pull the different systems and stakeholders together the way that I've pulled people together as the city controller. This is something that I've done across my experience. So for example, as city controller, I not only worked with DA Krasner and the police commissioner on issues related to the data around illegal carry and clearance rates. I worked with the courts as well. And for my office's audit of the investigation into the city's response to the civil unrest following George Floyd's murder, I pulled together a community council of people from every neighborhood across the city, people that were retired police officers and Black Lives Matter activists, so that we could all come to agreement on what we were looking at and what is the path forward. I say all this to say that I have the ability and experience to convene stakeholders so that we do chart a path forward together. And as mayor, I would pull the stakeholders into the same room to make sure we're all moving together. The courts, the DA, the different courts and family court and the criminal court, the sheriff, the police commissioner, everyone together and say, this is what we need to do. We need to move forward together. And any issues that come up between the partners need to get resolved quickly so that we can all move forward together. This is about getting things done. I have the experience within the city system, knowing how these agencies work, how they don't work, to be able to pull them together on day one to make change happen.
Thank you. Sherelle?
No, thank you so very much, Joanne. Writing a report and actually utilizing and employing the use of the convening power of the executive office are two totally different things. Let me ensure to you that the convening power of the mayor and the coordination, intergovernmental coordination with different branches of government and different departments within government is something that I have experienced and I've already demonstrated that I will get done. It requires leadership in sharing guidance to each agency, in placing victims and their safety at the forefront of our response to these kind of incidents. Again, technology to upgrade, breakdowns in silos, and it requires very timely interagency communication. In order to address this, because I have another event and I'm going to have to go, I want to tell you, I'm going to build 30,000 units of new affordable housing in Philadelphia. I'm going to make grants available to assist Philadelphians from all walks of life, but to ensure that victims of domestic violence is a specific constituency who we take into consideration, who's in need of housing, but also funding to support improvements to existing housing. We're going to work with PHA to ensure that victims of domestic violence have access to a quick transition when necessary because their lives are being threatened. We're also going to make sure that safe, supervised visitation centers along with child exchange locations. You don't know how important that becomes to a victim of domestic violence when you feel like you're being victimized all over again because you're being forced to meet with and interact with your abuser. We have to make sure those kind of supports and systems are available. I'm Sherelle Parker. I want to be your 100th mayor. And I think my lived life experience, along with my professional experience, puts me in a unique position to do so. I thank you all so very much for the time you've afforded me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And we will, until we meet again. Thank you so much. Mr. De Leon.
So please understand that all the individuals that are running for mayor right now, when they were in positions of leadership, either on city council or as the controller, that as a group, none of them went to the mayor en masse to say that we have to get our gun violence situation under control, which has a lot to do with domestic violence as well. None of them went to the court system to ask the court system, what can the courts do to help us reduce domestic violence or reduce gun violence? Not a single one. So I don't know anything about what they're talking about as far as.
I'm sorry.
Wait, you can say it.
No, I have to
You
interrupt
never
you. That's
walked to
not
the
true.
mayor.
It's not
You
true.
did not go to the mayor with city council. You did
All right.
not.
I'm going to say, Mr. DeLon,
Not true.
you can finish your thought and I'll come back to you, Rebecca, if that's okay.
Yeah, Rebecca, just hold on a second.
Response.
It's not true.
Okay.
What you're saying.
Well, then you can say something in a minute. It's just you and me. You can say something. So, as far as oversight is concerned, the reality is that there is a shared oversight between the legislative, the executive, and the judicial as it comes to the safety of the citizens of Philadelphia. Now, as far as that is concerned, yes, I will work with the court system. The court system has to be involved in this situation, along with the district attorney, the police, and city council has to be involved as well. And yeah, I do need the city controller involved in this as well, okay, as an oversight individual, because I need to talk to the city controller on many issues. Now, as far as it's concerned, when we have this oversight, we will be able, through the local incident management system, to totally manage everything as it relates to domestic violence, everything as it relates to homicide, everything as it relates to gun violence in the city of Philadelphia. And Rebecca, you can go on and say what you want to say.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon. Rebecca, you can respond.
Yes, so since 2019, as city controller, I publicly urged the mayor to do more on gun violence. I publicly called on him to enact the policies and programs that work in other places. When he did not do that, I took more action. I began to work in West Philadelphia with Jamie Gauthier. We publicly urged the mayor to declare gun violence the emergency that it is, to take several steps to help the neighborhoods where the violence was most prevalent, and he still did not do anything. We kept the pressure on that. We then, to be transparent, released all of the correspondence that we had with the mayor's office, urging the mayor to do more around gun violence. And on the issue of protecting women, even within our own city workforce, I have publicly sparred with Mayor Kenny over his lack of action around making changes to protect city employees from harassment and sexual abuse while in the workforce. And while he originally said he would do certain things in terms of centralizing reporting, which would protect women, all employees, he did not do that. I am the only elected official that has been critical of Mayor Kenny on these issues, publicly continuing to call him out. Thank you.
Then I will never mention you with city council again.
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate you.
Yes.
David O, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond. They were responding to the question, a coordinated community response is essential to assist victims of domestic violence. This means truly communication, coordination among systems such as police, the sheriff's office, the DA's office, and the courts. The mayor, as you know, has oversight of some of the systems, but not all. So the question then is, how will you pull disparate systems to work together?
So the mayor is in the executive branch and is the boss of the executive branch, but is not the boss of the legislative branch or the judicial branch. And even in the executive branch, there are different departments and agencies, whether they be state, federal, nonprofits, and certain elected positions within the city itself are elected, such as the district attorney's office. However, for many of these things, the mayor writes the budget. And so the mayor has the power of the budget in order to get the cooperation of these other entities. Not in all cases, but in many cases, particularly the district attorney's office and the sheriff. However, they are separately elected offices. And of course, the controller is the watchdog on the mayor, him or herself. But as mayor, I think it's important to have the initiative to have a plan, to present it to those other elected officials to get their buy-in. As mayor, I can tell my deputies and my commissioners and my staff what to do. We can provide them the support, the resources. But when it comes to the buy-in of other people, there may be some budget needs that they have to be part of that coordinated effort. And if they don't want to be, it's very hard to make them. But I believe that right now the people want it. And it's also important to bring the power of the public vote to this conversation, because that is at the end of the day who we're serving, the public. And so I think as mayor, bringing them together, it'll be a task, but I think it's something that can be done.
Thank you. The next question, I'm going to go in the following order: Rebecca, De Leon, and then David O. Philadelphia has a state-of-the-art and unique facility for addressing sexual violence in the city of Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia Safety Collaborative. The collaborative houses together in one facility the Philadelphia Police Department Special Victims Unit, the Philadelphia Children's Alliance, Department of Human Services, and the Philadelphia Sexual Assault Response Center, where adults and children who are sexually assaulted commence a police investigation, adults receive forensic exams, and children forensic interviews take. Will you support the continuation of the Philadelphia Safety Collaborative with appropriate funding and resources? Rebecca.
Yes, absolutely. This collaborative is very important in order to make a better experience for the victims. The victims of sexual abuse have already been traumatized. They are coming in feeling extremely vulnerable, and the traditional way that law enforcement would handle the situation is to interview and re-interview and have different detectives and different people asking them the same questions. And it's just incredibly devastating to the victims on top of the original trauma of being abused. So this is something I absolutely would fund. I think it's incredibly important, especially for the children who have already gone through so much and who do need therapy, psychological support, as well as the police support to get through this initial process. So absolutely, I support it. And I think that it's a way for everyone involved in the family's care in the situation to be on the same page without re-traumatizing the victims and providing the best support possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. De Leon?
Yes, I do want to maintain the collaboration, and I also want to increase the funding. Now, let me say that when we're trying to make sure that people are safe, we're trying to get guns off the street as fast as possible. Yes, there are grants, but when we're trying to do things as soon as possible, we're going to have to use money on hand, which is, again, back to that $400 million that I would use in the year 2024. So as far as the situation is concerned, in investigation, what happens is that police have to make sure that they have probable cause to arrest an individual. Okay, so initially when the victim comes in, there's a reasonable suspicion. So when the first detective interviews, they take the interview down, and yes, they might send another detective to and it might seem like a re-interview, but it's about whether or not the person is maintaining the same story, as to whether or not they're changing up, to make sure that when they put the arrest warrant out for the individual, that that the facts are correct. So, but what we have to do is do it with empathy. We have to do it with a softness, because the person has been traumatized, and 9 out of 10, the situation that brought them there is the correct situation. So I would definitely give more money to make sure that the collaboration continues, and that it continues and it can take care of anybody that walks through the door in a safe and secure way that is done with courtesy and respect.
Thank you. Mr. O?
Yeah, thank you. The co-location of these entities, starting with law enforcement and then the nonprofits that provide the service and other governmental agencies that are particularly adept at handling sexual violence, juveniles, children, sometimes even infants. It's a good idea. It's a smart idea. And so therefore, I would continue it and make sure that it has the resources and funds and technology that it needs to do a good job. For people who don't know, it's important that in this process, for example, like we have a special victims unit of police officers but sometimes they don't have the full amount of training to interview sometimes very, very young children, and they have to do it in a way that is not suggestive, so that the children are not kind of led into making statements or indicating that someone is guilty who is not. It has to be done very neutrally. And so the co-located facility has the appropriate space, has the appropriate distance, has the appropriate people who are trained and have the background, the education to provide that level of service. And then they are all there together. So that saves a lot of bureaucracy and wasted time.
Great. The current administration created the Office of Domestic Violence Strategies. The office currently focuses on internal city systems. Some cities, such as Chicago and New York, have large offices working on gender-based violence issues. These offices often are both internally and externally facing and manage large budgets. What plans do you have for the Office of Domestic Violence Strategies? And I'll start with Rebecca.
So I think that we need to have an Office of Domestic Violence Strategy that does meaningful work. I, as mayor, would look to other large cities to see how they are organizing that structure. And if New York and Chicago and other cities are doing this, are doing this function, this office in a way that is making it much more effective, then that's something I would look to do here in Philadelphia. I would also look to see how the Department of Behavioral Health that the city spends $1 billion on could possibly work in conjunction with our Office of Domestic Violence Support and be a coordinating function between the police and the courts to make sure that these issues are taken care of. I think it would be a good way to basically strengthening this office and this function would be a good way to make sure that it stays on the top of the priority list for the police and the courts and others to fix issues such as Act 79, such as making sure that detectives are responding in a timely manner and there's enough detectives for sexual assault. To me, this is a way to make sure that victims of domestic violence and sexual assault get the support that they need. So absolutely, this is something that I would look to strengthen, and I would want to work with partners such as Women Against Abuse to do that in the best way possible.
Thank you. David O?
Yeah, I believe that the Office's domestic violence strategies, what they're doing, is important. I do think that they should focus on being a think tank and a research center, best practices. The group of people that they're dealing with is a specific group. We have people that love each other, that are dependent on each other, that many times have people dependent on them, such as children or grandchildren. They typically play a very important role in our society. And unfortunately, when deal with a lot of outside pressures and stress or they go in different directions in their life, the hurt and the anger, the anxiety, the stress sometimes comes out in terms of striking back. Abuse, physical and emotional abuse. To the extent that is a difficult topic to deal with, particularly when you have people that want to stay together. Sometimes they want to be apart, sometimes they want to get back together. What is the role of our city in dealing with preemptive measures, in responding appropriately, particularly when we're dealing with different religions, different cultures, different languages? I do think it's important that there's a acknowledgement that we serve the public. We don't tell the public what to do. And I think this is an area where we have to be careful not to be judgmental, to draw to the conclusions or produce the conclusions that we believe are appropriate when the parties themselves don't believe it's appropriate. And so I think it is important to have an office that recognizes all of this, and then translates for our departmental people, our workforce, how to properly handle these things to get the data, the information, the resources, and the connection they need and the supports. And so that office could be a place where all our different workforce contacts to give them suggestions, ideas, or to ask questions or seek support or resources.
Thank you. Mr. D. Leon.
As mayor, my first job is to save lives and reduce violence. So if I have an office of domestic violence and it's only internal, then I'm cheating the citizen, because my job is not only internal as far as saving lives and reducing violence, but external as far as saving lives and reducing violence. So it would have to be changed into an internal and external situation similar to what they do in New York. Now, with that said, I'm not sure if I would want to dilute them with the behavioral health situation, because we do need the behavioral health situation, but that might need to stay as a standalone entity. But I would have to sit down with you, because, see, I also don't want to close the Women Organized Against Abuse out of this situation. I need to train you the same way I'm going to train my department heads as incident specialists, because the situation that we have as far as domestic violence, when I'm calling it a dramatic incident throughout the city, I need to have all my people trained on how we approach dramatic incidents. And that's where you and your staff are going to get training through the Federal Emergency Management Association, as far as being recognized as incident specialists, just like my director of public safety will be, just like all my department heads will be, just like I am right now. I myself am a trained incident specialist. So this is a situation that we would all sit down and talk about as to how we will expand it externally as well, and what it will do in that particular type of environment, and with that new name, that it's internal and external.
Well, thank you. It's hard to believe it's already an hour and a half goes by so quickly. You can imagine we have many more questions. I know that we do have some in our social media, so we will make sure that you all receive the questions that individuals have posted on both our YouTube and our social media. We want to thank you so much for participating today. I think we can all agree on one thing, and that is that no one deserves to be a victim, and that we all deserve to live violent-free lives. And so we are really extremely elated and thank you, and look forward to working with whoever is elected next mayor. But before we close, I'd like to be able to provide you each 2 minutes to help us wrap up in some closing remarks. So I will begin with David O.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for hosting this opportunity to have this important discussion. I think it is very specific because it really focused on domestic violence. On May 16th, the voters will go to vote in the primaries, and there are many candidates on the Democratic side. I'm on the Republican side, and since I'm the sole candidate, I will win on May 16th. I wish well to all the candidates on the Democratic side, and I look forward to seeing who is going to win the Democratic primary. This election is too important to end on May 16th. For the most part, we've been answering the same question with 60-second or 90-second answers as we go about from forum to forum. Most of the voters aren't even really paying attention to this race until about now, until May 16th. But there are much more complicated scenarios. People really want to know what the answers are. They want to go in depth into the history of what people have done, what they say. They've heard some conflicting things, but they haven't had a chance to see the evidence. This will happen as we move to November 7th. Tuesday, November 7th is the long run to who is going to be the mayor in this city. And I think it's so important that we just don't have another scenario where we elect a mayor on sound bites. And so with that, I urge all the voters to pay attention, to vote for the best candidate who will deliver for you the city that you want, the community, the neighborhood, and the future for yourself and your family, because we have got to turn this situation around. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca?
So in closing, I am running for mayor because I believe I'm the right person to truly lead our city forward, to fix the issues facing our cities, facing our city, and make it work better. And part of that is protecting victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And as city controller, I used my voice to support victims, and I will as mayor. I'll use my voice and my power to protect victims and support victims. As mayor, I will work on day one to make our city safer, cleaner, and to fix our school system. On gun violence, I'll start to work on day one. I'll implement the strategies that have been shown to work in other cities: group violence intervention, cognitive behavior therapy, and cure violence. To get this violence down on our streets. I'll also make sure that we're coordinating with the DA and the police commissioner so that everyone is moving in the same direction. And I'll make sure that we have good services into our neighborhoods, park services, library hours. We must have a city where everyone can thrive. And as mayor, I'll work hard to fix our public school system. My daughter is in 7th grade in the school system, and it's incredibly important to me that we fix our neighborhood schools and provide good seats, whether they be traditional public or charter. And thirdly, I want to make sure that the city's working the way it should, that the streets are paved and the trash is picked up. And we are clean and the way that the city should be, so that the beauty of our city truly shines through. As mayor, I will stand up for victims, and it's incredibly important to me. I think government is there when people's families are not there for them. And if government doesn't work, then everything can fall apart. So as mayor, I will make sure that this government works for victims of domestic abuse, for survivors, and we will move forward together. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Mr. James D. Leon.
Well, I really appreciate being here with you today. I'm running for mayor, as I said a little earlier, to save lives and reduce violence. I was a judge for 34 years, and as a judge, I made decisions on a daily basis that saved the lives of Philadelphians. There was a period of time when there were over 400 homicides in the city, and I was appointed as the supervising judge. And I led the initiatives that reduced the homicide total in the city from that 400 down to 250 a year for 7 straight years. So I know how to reduce violence. I know how to reduce homicides. Now, as a person, I was frustrated because of the lack of action on behalf of a dysfunctional city council, which is what led me to run for mayor. I was a single parent at one time. When my first wife died and left me with a 13-month-old child. Before she died, when I was waiting for the results from the bar examination, I drove a cab and we were on welfare. So I know the plight of people. I also have had guns pointed at me. I've had shotguns pointed at me. And I was in a shootout where I was with the police, and the police asked me to see if I could make it back to the street to get him some backup. And I did get back there to get him some backup with bullets going over my head. So I'm part also of the violence as well, where I've been part of that. And the first instance I had of domestic violence was at Howard University, when a young lady tried to break up from her boyfriend, and when she went upstairs with her girlfriend to move things out of her house, the boyfriend came and told the police he just wanted to say goodbye to her, and they were both med students at Howard, and he went upstairs and he shot the woman, and shot her girlfriend. And so that was my first taste of domestic violence, and I've been against it ever since. And as mayor, I will champion the rights of a person not to be harmed, not to have have any domestic violence against them. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you. And this brings us to the end. I just want to thank you all once again. Definitely want to also all participants that joined us, we thank you. To all the staff and the advocates who really helped us put these questions together. We are committed to serving our next mayor and working alongside and hold them accountable as well. So we will be presente as Women Against Abuse and elevating the voices to all survivors. Thank you to my staff who really helped behind the scenes to put this together. And we look forward to everybody going out. Make your voice matter on May 16th. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really great.
Thanks.